In the dim glow of her cramped Queens apartment, Olivia Grant stared at her cracked phone screen, tears blurring the headline. Brandon Hayes named Young Entrepreneur of the Year. His breakthrough fintech set to sell for millions. The man who once promised her forever had stolen her dreams, her code, her life. 2 years of hiding, scraping by on waitress tips, and now this. She whispered to the empty room, "I'm already dead." But deep inside, something flickered. Anger, maybe hope. Revenge was no longer impossible. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. Rain tapped softly against the single window of the Queen's apartment. A steady rhythm like an old clock marking time no one wanted to count. The room smelled of damp plaster and yesterday's coffee. A single bulb hung bare overhead, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Olivia Grant was 27, though the lines around her eyes made her look older on nights like this. She had shoulder-length brown hair pulled into a loose knot, strands escaping like they were tired too. Her skin was pale from too many night shifts and too little sun. She stood 5 feet 6 inches, slim but not fragile, the kind of body that had learned to carry heavy trays and heavier secrets without complaint. Tonight she still wore the waitress uniform. White long-sleeve shirt, black pants, black apron tied at the waist, black flats scuffed at the toes. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed, back straight, hands folded in her lap as though waiting for permission to fall apart. She opened her phone the way one opens a wound, slowly, knowing it will hurt. The screen lit her face blue. The headline appeared first. Brandon Hayes named Young Entrepreneur of the Year. His breakthrough fintech set to sell for millions. Below it, a photograph of him in a navy suit, smiling the practiced smile she once believed was only for her. The article praised his vision, his innovation, the way he had built something from nothing. Nothing about the woman who had stayed up nights writing the first lines of code. Nothing about the nights she explained risk algorithms to him while he pretended to listen. Nothing about the morning he filed false charges, froze her accounts, and told the world she was the thief. Olivia's breath caught. She scrolled slowly, reading every word as though each one were a small betrayal renewed. The sale was imminent. A major fund was ready to pay 8 figures for the platform she had dreamed up in the quiet hours after caring for her sister Emma. When Emma's hands could no longer speak, but her mind still raced. The platform was supposed to help people like Emma, people who could not hear warnings, who needed extra time to understand a transaction alert. Olivia had named the first prototype after her sister. Brandon had renamed it after himself. She set the phone face down on the mattress. The rain grew louder, or perhaps it was only her pulse. She thought of her mother in the nursing home across the river, the monthly bills that arrived like clockwork, the hearing aids that cost more than 3 months' tips. She thought of the USB drive hidden in the back of the sock drawer, code, notes, old photos she could not bear to delete and could not bear to look at. She thought of the lawyer's letter 2 years ago. "If you pursue this, we will countersue for defamation and theft of trade secrets." She had folded the letter, placed it in a shoebox, and never opened it again. A long silence followed. The kind of silence that lives inside a person after everything loud has already happened. She whispered to the empty room, "I'm already dead." But even as the words left her lips, something small and stubborn stirred beneath them. Not anger yet. Anger would come later, bright and clean. This was quieter. A flicker. The same flicker that had kept her getting up at 4 every afternoon, pulling on the uniform, smiling at strangers who never looked back. The flicker that said perhaps the story was not finished. Perhaps what had been taken could still be reclaimed, not for revenge, but for the simple dignity of being seen again. She rose, crossed to the window, and rested her forehead against the cool glass. The city lights blurred through the rain. Somewhere out there, Brandon was celebrating. Somewhere out there, her mother waited for the next payment. And somewhere inside her, a promise took shape without words. She would not disappear forever. The dining room of Le Bernardin carried the hush of old money and fresh linen. Crystal glasses caught the low chandelier light, scattering soft prisms across white tablecloths. Outside, the late afternoon rain had eased to a fine mist that clung to the windows like quiet regret. Olivia moved between the tables with the careful grace of someone who had learned to disappear in plain sight. 27 years had etched a gentle weariness into her posture, Yet her hand still moved with the same quiet precision she once used to type code late into the night. Her brown hair was pinned back neatly for the shift, a few strands loosening as the evening wore on. She wore the same uniform as always: white shirt, black pants, black apron tied at the waist, black flats that whispered against the polished floor. When she reached table 12, she paused. The older woman sitting there had silver hair pinned in a soft chignon, gentle blue eyes, and the calm, expectant stillness of someone accustomed to waiting for the world to notice her. Victoria Bennett was 61, elegant in a light beige cashmere cardigan over white silk, black trousers tailored just so. She had been deaf since her 40s, the silence long enough to become familiar, almost companionable. Yet loneliness still lived in the slight tilt of her head when strangers smiled politely and moved on. Tonight she sat beside her son, hands folded, watching the room with patient interest. Olivia lifted her hands slowly. "Good evening," she signed, the movements clear and unhurried. "May I bring you anything?" Victoria's eyes widened, then softened. A small, surprised smile broke across her face. She raised her own hands and answered, "You sign. Beautifully. Do you have someone deaf in your life?" Your hands move like someone who has cared for them a long time. Olivia felt the question settle in her chest like a stone smoothed by years of river water. She saw Emma again, Emma at 23, laughing with her hands, teaching Olivia the signs for sunset and "I love you," until the illness took her voice and then her breath. The memory carried no sharp edge tonight, only a tender ache. Olivia signed back. "Yes, my sister. She's gone now." Victoria's expression shifted to something deeper than gratitude. Recognition, perhaps kinship. She signed, "I'm sorry, but thank you for seeing me." Most people just nod and smile. Olivia's throat tightened. She signed, "The salmon tonight is very good. The chef uses a light herb butter. Would you like to hear about it?" They talked, slowly, deliberately, about the dish, about Paris in spring, about the small joys that survive silence. Victoria's laughter came in silent waves, her shoulders shaking gently, her eyes bright. For the first time in many years, she did not feel like an afterthought at the table. Across the room, Noah Bennett watched. 35, tall and composed in charcoal gray wool, black hair neatly trimmed, gray eyes steady but carrying the quiet weight of decisions made and regretted. He had spent a lifetime building things, companies, walls, certainties, yet the sight of his mother's unguarded joy pierced something he had long kept closed. He lifted his phone, framed the moment discreetly, Olivia's hands mid-sign, Victoria's face alight. He did not know why he took the picture, only that the image felt important, like a key to a door he had not known was locked. The evening moved on. Olivia returned to her station, cheeks warm, heart strangely full. Victoria reached across the table and touched her son's arm, signing quickly, "She is kind, and she remembers what it means to listen." Noah nodded once, gaze lingering on the young woman folding napkins with careful hands. He felt the old restlessness stir, not ambition this time, but something gentler, more insistent. Curiosity, yes, but also the faint, unfamiliar tug of recognition. He had spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Here was someone who had given without asking. The restaurant hummed around them, glasses clinking, voices low. But in that small pocket of stillness between table 12 and the service station, something had shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. A hand had been extended in silence, and another hand had answered. The restaurant had quieted after the dinner rush. Only a few tables remained, candles guttering low in their holders. The air held the faint scent of seared fish, warm bread, and the clean wood polish of the bar. Rain had started again outside, a soft patter against the tall windows like fingers drumming on an old desk. Noah Bennett rose from his seat at table 12. 35 years had given him a steady presence, tall, broad-shouldered, charcoal suit still impeccable after hours at the table. His black hair was neatly combed, a few strands of early silver at the temples catching the light. His gray eyes carried the look of a man who had learned to read rooms the way others read books. Slowly, carefully, missing little. He crossed the floor with unhurried steps, hands in his pockets the way a person approaches something fragile they do not wish to startle. Olivia stood at the service station, folding fresh napkins into precise squares. Her uniform was slightly rumpled now, sleeves pushed to the elbows, a faint sheen of fatigue on her pale skin. She looked up as he approached, brown eyes wary but polite. She offered the small, practiced smile of service. "My mother can't stop talking about you," Noah said. His voice was low, measured, the kind that carried without effort. "She says you made her feel seen. That doesn't happen often." Olivia lowered her gaze to the napkin in her hands. "I'm glad she enjoyed the evening," she answered softly. "She's very kind." They stood for a moment in the narrow space between the bar and the swinging door to the kitchen. The low hum of the dishwasher drifted through. Noah leaned one elbow on the polished wood counter, casual but not careless. "You corrected my pronunciation earlier," he said. "When I said risque, you said it the French way, resque. Most people let it slide." Olivia's fingers stilled on the linen. She had not meant to speak. The word had slipped out under her breath, an old habit from late nights studying in a Columbia library carrel. She met his eyes briefly. "I studied there for a while. Languages. It sticks." Noah nodded slowly. He saw the flicker in her gaze, the quick shadow that crossed like a cloud over still water. "Languages and other things, maybe?" She folded the napkin once more, tighter than necessary. "Just languages," she said. Her voice was even, but the words carried the weight of a door gently closed. He did not press. Instead, he straightened, offered a small nod. "Thank you again. For my mother." Olivia watched him walk back to the table. Her chest felt tight, as though she had held her breath too long. She had spoken too much. A single word had opened a crack she had spent 2 years sealing. Yet there had been no judgment in his eyes, only quiet interest, the kind that waits rather than demands. It unsettled her more than suspicion would have. Later, in the back office of his midtown tower, Noah sat alone. The room smelled of leather and old books. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city glittering wet under streetlights. He opened his phone to the photo he had taken earlier. Olivia's hands in mid-sign, her face soft with attention, his mother's smile wide and unguarded. He sent the image to Rebecca Cole, his assistant of 8 years. Rebecca was 32, sharp-minded, discreet, always in a dark blazer and low heels, her dark hair pulled into a neat knot. She answered almost at once. "Find out what you can," he wrote. Quietly, by the time he reached home, Rebecca had replied. A single attached file, a partial LinkedIn profile screenshot cached from years ago. Olivia Grant, BA Linguistics, Columbia University, a brief note about fintech coursework. Then, nothing. The account had gone dormant. No updates, no connections visible. A digital footprint erased with care. Noah sat in the leather chair by the window, glass of water untouched on the side table. He stared at the screen. He knew what it felt like to lose pieces of yourself, to watch a partnership dissolve, to choose forgiveness and pay for it later with regret. He had forgiven once, and it had cost him a company he had helped build. The scar was faint now, but it still ached in quiet moments. This woman, though, this quiet server with hands that spoke when her voice would not, she carried a deeper wound. He could see it in the way she folded napkins, in the careful way she answered questions. She was hiding. Not from the world, perhaps, but from what the world had done to her. He closed the phone. The city lights blurred through the rain-streaked glass. He thought of his mother's face tonight. Bright, alive, seen. And he thought of Olivia's eyes when she said, "Just languages," a lie told gently to protect something fragile. He did not know her story yet, but he knew enough to understand that some silences are not empty. They are full of memory, of loss, of the long, slow work of surviving. And sometimes, if you listen long enough, they begin to speak. Rain fell harder now against the Queen's window, turning the night into a soft gray blur. The small apartment felt heavier in the quiet hours after midnight. A single lamp spilled yellow light across the scarred wooden table, warming the room with the faint smell of dust and old paper. Olivia sat there, hands wrapped around a mug of cooling tea. The steam rose in lazy curls, carrying the herbal scent of chamomile, her mother's favorite, the one she brewed on bad nights. 27 years had taught her to sit with pain like an old friend, but tonight it pressed closer. Her brown hair hung loose now, freed from the work pin, framing a face pale and thoughtful. The waitress uniform lay folded on the chair, replaced by a worn gray sweater that hung loose on her slim frame. She stared at the sock drawer, half open, where the USB drive hid like a buried secret. She pulled it out slowly, the plastic cool against her palm. The drive was small, unremarkable, but it held the weight of a life undone. She plugged it into her old laptop, the screen flickering to life with a soft hum. Files appeared, code lines, notes scrawled in digital margins, photos from another time. One image filled the screen. Brandon Hayes, 31, leaning over a desk beside her. His black hair was slicked back then, eyes brown and sharp, always calculating even in laughter. He wore a navy suit, the kind that said success before he had earned it. Ambitious, yes, but with a quiet ruthlessness she had mistaken for drive. He had promised partnership, love, a future built together. The code scrolled before her. It was her creation, born in the quiet after Emma's passing. Emma had been 23, soft brown hair framing warm eyes that spoke volumes without sound. She wore oversized sweaters, hands dancing in sign language even as illness stole her strength. The tech was for people like her, algorithms that made transactions safe for the deaf, alerts that vibrated, interfaces that signed. Olivia had poured her grief into it, turning loss into something helpful. Brandon had watched, nodded, taken notes. Then he took it all. A deep breath escaped her. The rain drummed steady on the roof like a heartbeat remembering. She clicked another file, a LinkedIn post from him, screenshotted before he erased her. Grateful to family and friends for this journey, it read. No mention of her. He had filed the patents in his name, posted the successes as his own. When she confronted him, his voice had been smooth, almost sorry. It's business, Liv. You understand. Then the accusations. Embezzlement, falsified records. His lawyers sent the letter, crisp white paper, black ink warning of countersuits for defamation, theft of secrets. She had stood in her old apartment, hand trembling, choosing silence over ruin. Better to vanish than fight a war she could not win. The pain came now, not sharp but deep, like roots twisting in soil. She felt it in her chest, a hollow where trust had lived. Brandon's betrayal was not just theft. It was erasure. He had taken her work, her name, her purpose. The platform was meant to honor Emma, to ease lives like her mother's struggling with bills and silence. Now it profited him, while she scraped tips to pay for hearing aids that barely worked. She closed the laptop gently. The room fell quiet again, save the rain's murmur. She thought of her mother's tired eyes. Emma's last signed, I love you. The hurt lingered, but beneath it stirred something softer. Forgiveness, not for him, but for herself. She had survived. That was enough for now. A long pause in the dim light. The tea had gone cold. She slipped the drive back into the drawer. Tomorrow she would rise, pull on the uniform, face the world again. But tonight, in this small space, she allowed the tears. Not for what was lost, but for the quiet strength that remained. One day, perhaps, the truth would find its way. Not through anger, but through the simple grace of being whole again. The small cafe on a side street in Midtown smelled of fresh ground coffee and rain-soaked wool. Mid-morning light filtered through fogged windows, soft and forgiving. A few patrons sat scattered, heads bent over newspapers or phones, the low murmur of conversation blending with the hiss of the espresso machine. Noah had chosen a corner table near the back. He arrived early, charcoal coat draped over the chair, sleeves of his white shirt rolled once at the cuffs. 35 years had etched a calm certainty into his posture, but his gray eyes held a quiet restlessness today. He ordered 2 coffees, black for himself, one with a touch of cream for her, though he did not yet know her preference. When Olivia stepped through the door, he rose. She looked smaller out of uniform, 27 in a simple navy sweater and jeans, brown hair loose around her shoulders, damp from the drizzle. Her eyes carried the same guarded depth he had seen at the restaurant. Tired, watchful, but not defeated. She hesitated at the threshold, then crossed the room and sat opposite him. "Thank you for coming," he said. His voice was low, steady, the way one speaks to someone carrying something fragile. Olivia nodded once. Her hands rested on the table, fingers lightly laced. "Your mother... she's well? She hasn't stopped talking about you." A small smile touched his mouth. "She says you reminded her what it feels like to be heard." They sat in the gentle hum of the cafe. Steam rose from the cups between them. Noah took a slow breath. "I called Brandon Hayes this morning." Olivia's gaze sharpened. She did not speak, but her shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly. "I asked about the accessibility features in his platform," Noah continued. "The ones for the deaf." Said I was impressed, curious how they came about. He paused, letting the memory settle. Brandon's voice had come through the speaker, smooth and confident. "I thought it up one sleepless night," he had said. "Just hit me, built the whole thing from there." The lie had been effortless, almost proud. Olivia's eyes dropped to her coffee. She stirred it once, slowly. The spoon clinked softly against the porcelain. Noah watched her. He didn't mention a partner, or anyone who might have dreamed it first. She looked up then. Something raw flickered in her expression. Grief, perhaps, or the ghost of anger long buried. He never did. A long quiet followed. The rain tapped the window like distant applause. Noah leaned forward slightly. "I had a partner once. Small idea. Nothing like yours. He took it, ran with it. I could have fought. I chose to forgive instead." He looked past her for a moment at the blurred city beyond the glass. Lost the next deal because of it. Lost more than money. Learned that forgiveness without truth is just another way of disappearing. Olivia's breath caught. She had not expected confession. Not from him. Her fingers stilled on the spoon. "I don't know your full story," he said. "But I know what it costs to be erased. I won't let that happen to someone else if I can help it." She searched his face. No pity there. Only a steady, quiet resolve. For the first time in 2 years, someone looked at her without asking for proof. Someone believed the silence she carried. Tears pricked her eyes, sudden and unbidden. She blinked them back. "Why would you do this? You don't know me." Noah considered the question. "Because my mother smiled last night in a way I haven't seen since I was a boy. Because you gave her that without asking for anything. And because I've spent too long building walls instead of bridges." The cafe lights softened around them. A barista wiped down the counter, slow and rhythmic. Olivia felt something loosen in her chest. Small, tentative, like the first breath after holding it too long. Noah reached into his coat pocket and placed a simple card on the table. His name, his private line. "If you ever want to talk, or if you want help taking back what's yours, I have resources. Lawyers. Time." She did not take the card immediately. She looked at it as though it might vanish. Then her hand moved, slow and deliberate, and closed around it. The rain eased outside. A single ray of sun broke through the clouds, touching the table between them. Neither spoke for a long moment. The silence was not empty. It was full of possibility, of trust offered without demand, of the slow, patient work of beginning again. In that quiet corner of the city, 2 wounded lives brushed against each other, not to heal everything. Not yet. Just to remind one another that being seen was still possible. The conference room on the 32nd floor of Vertex Capital smelled of fresh coffee and polished mahogany. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the gray Manhattan sky, rain streaking the glass in slow, deliberate lines. The long table gleamed under recessed lights, chairs empty except for the 2 men already seated. The air was cool, almost clinical, carrying the faint scent of expensive aftershave and tension. Noah Bennett sat at one end, calm in his charcoal suit, hands folded on the table. 35 years had taught him to keep his face still when the moment mattered most. His gray eyes held steady, but beneath the composure lay the quiet resolve of a man who had decided long ago that truth was worth more than any deal. Across from him sat Brandon Hayes, 31, navy suit sharp, black hair slicked back, brown eyes bright with the confidence of someone who believed he had already won. His smile was practiced, wide, easy, the kind that had carried him through boardrooms and betrayals alike. They had been speaking for 20 minutes, due diligence, intellectual property timelines, the usual questions wrapped in polite language. Noah's voice remained even. "The accessibility layer," he said. "The one for the deaf. Impressive. Your team must have spent years refining it." Brandon leaned back, fingers drumming once on the table. "A breakthrough, really. Came to me one night. Built it fast." The door opened then, soft footsteps. Olivia stepped inside. She wore a simple black blazer over a white blouse, hair pulled back neatly, 27 years carried with quiet dignity. Her brown eyes were clear, steady, though her hands trembled once before she clasped them. She carried a slim tablet and a small folder. Nothing dramatic, only the weight of 2 years of silence. Brandon's smile froze. His eyes widened, then narrowed. He laughed once, a short, disbelieving sound. Who is this?" Noah did not rise. "Dr. Olivia Grant, independent consultant, specializing in algorithmic integrity. I hired her to verify the IP chain." Olivia walked to the head of the table. She placed the tablet down gently. Her voice, when it came, was soft but clear. "Hello, Brandon." He stared. The room grew quieter still. The rain tapped the windows like a patient witness. She opened the folder. First, a photograph, 2 young people at a desk, laughing over a laptop. Her hand on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. Then another, a late-night office, her typing while he watched. The engagement ring glinted on her finger. Brandon's throat worked. "I attend a lot of events. Photos happen." Olivia did not flinch. She tapped the tablet. A recording played, his voice younger, warmer. "You're the brain, Liv. I'm just the face." The words filled the room, simple and damning. She slid the tablet toward him. Side-by-side code, her original files, timestamps from 3 years before his patents, metadata clean and unalterable, dates that proved the work was hers, lines she had written in the quiet after Emma's funeral, when grief had turned to purpose. Brandon's face drained of color. His hands gripped the table edge. This is fabricated. Anyone can..." Olivia looked at him then. Not with hatred, with something quieter. Sorrow, perhaps. Or release. "I kept everything," she said, "because I thought one day someone might ask." The room held its breath. Brandon's eyes darted to Noah, then back to her. He swallowed. "Look, Olivia, we can work this out, a settlement, a large one. You walk away comfortable. No one needs to know." She shook her head slowly. "I don't want your money, Brandon. I want what you took. My name, my work, my sister's memory." Tears slipped down her cheeks. Silent, steady. Not from weakness, from the sudden freedom of speaking truth aloud after years of silence. Noah rose then. He moved to her side, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. She leaned into it just slightly. The gesture was small, but it filled the room. Brandon stood abruptly. His chair scraped back. "This deal is dead," he said, voice cracking. "You'll regret this." Noah's voice was calm. "The deal was dead the moment you claimed what wasn't yours. My lawyers are already moving. The SEC will be next." Brandon looked between them. 2 people standing together, quiet, unbroken. He opened his mouth, closed it. Then he turned and left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. The rain continued outside, steady and unhurried. Olivia wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. She looked at Noah. "Thank you," she whispered. He shook his head. "You did this. I only stood beside you." They stood there a long moment. The city hummed beyond the glass, indifferent. But in that room, something had shifted. Not victory, not yet. Just the beginning of being whole again. A quiet promise settled between them. Truth, once spoken, could not be taken back. And sometimes that was enough to begin healing. 6 months had passed, and the city had moved on. Spring had come to New York, soft and tentative, with pale sunlight filtering through the new leaves on the trees outside the small community center in Brooklyn. Inside, the room smelled of fresh paint and warm coffee, the kind of place where hope felt possible again. Wooden tables stood in a loose circle, sunlight slanting across the floor in gentle bars. Olivia Grant stood at the front, 27 now, though the years had softened rather than aged her. Her brown hair was loose today, catching the light, her eyes clear and steady. She wore a simple cream sweater and dark jeans, the black blazer of confrontation long gone. In front of her sat a dozen children, most deaf, their hands already moving in eager signs. She had rebuilt Grant Solutions, not for revenge, but for them. The platform was hers again, refined, renamed quietly after Emma. It helped children like these navigate a world that often forgot to listen. Across the room, Noah Bennett leaned against the wall, arms folded loosely. 35, still tall and composed in a light gray sweater and dark trousers. His black hair touched with the same faint silver at the temples. His gray eyes followed her with a quiet pride that needed no words. He had learned sign language in these months, slowly, patiently, from his mother. Not to impress, but to belong. Victoria Bennett sat near the front, 61, silver hair pinned softly, beige cardigan draped over her shoulders. Her blue eyes shone as she watched Olivia teach. She signed along with the group, her movements graceful, unhurried. When Olivia demonstrated the new alert feature, vibrations timed to visual cues, Victoria's face lit with the same wonder she had shown that first night at the restaurant. The children laughed in silent waves, hands clapping without sound. Olivia smiled, real, unguarded. She felt the old hollow in her chest fill slowly, not with triumph, but with purpose. Brandon was gone. 5 years in prison for fraud and theft of intellectual property. The settlement had come quietly, enough to pay her mother's care, to fund the center, to start again. But the real gift was the silence he could no longer impose. She was no longer erased. Noah stepped forward when the session ended. The children filed out, waving small hands in goodbye. He approached her slowly, as though the moment deserved care. From his pocket, he drew a small velvet box. Inside lay a simple gold band, engraved on the inside with the sign for "I love you," the one his mother had taught him months ago. He knelt. Not dramatically, just enough to meet her eyes. "Olivia," he said, voice low and sure. "I've spent my life building things that could be taken away. But you taught me what lasts. Will you let me build a life with you?" Tears gathered in her eyes, soft and unhurried. She looked at the ring, then at him, at the man who had stood beside her when the world had turned away. She signed first, hands steady. "Yes." Then she spoke it aloud, voice trembling only a little. "Yes." Victoria rose from her chair. She crossed to them, eyes bright. She lifted her hands and signed slowly, deliberately. "May your days be full of listening, and may you always find each other in the quiet." She placed a gentle hand on each of their shoulders, then stepped back, smiling through tears of her own. Later, outside the center, the sun had broken fully through the clouds. Olivia stood on the sidewalk, Noah behind her, arms around her waist. She leaned back against him, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath. Children played in the small courtyard nearby, hands flying in joyful conversation. One girl looked up, waved. Olivia waved back. She thought of Emma then, not with sorrow, but with gratitude. Of her mother, now comfortable and cared for. Of Brandon, whose choices had led him to a different kind of silence. And of Noah, who had chosen to stand with her, not because she needed saving, but because he believed she was worth standing beside. The wind carried the scent of blooming cherry trees. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked once, a golden retriever, old and gentle, tail wagging slowly as it watched the children. They did not speak for a long while. There was no need. In the quiet that followed, Olivia felt something settle deep inside her. Not the end of pain, but the beginning of peace. She had lost much, but she had found more. Trust, purpose, love that asked nothing but to be returned. She turned in his arms, looked up at him. He smiled, the small, real one he saved for her alone. They walked away together, hand in hand, toward whatever came next. The city kept moving, but for them, time had finally slowed enough to let them breathe. As the years gather like quiet rain, many of us sit in rooms grown too still, aching joints, fading hearing, the slow weight of illness, and the deeper ache of loneliness when the house echoes with no one to answer. Yet stories like Olivia's remind us, love can find us again, purpose can return, even after loss. If you're carrying that silence today, know you are not forgotten. Share your heart in the comments below. Someone is listening. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so we can walk this road together. May the Lord wrap you in his peace, ease your pain, and send gentle companionship to your door. You are loved, always.